Have you ever wondered why some health problems seem much more common in certain places, or, among specific groups of people, or even how the lives our ancestors led, like hundreds of thousands of years ago, might still be shaping your body and health today? Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into human health, looking way beyond just, germs and genetics. We'll explore how our cultures, our history, and even our ancient evolutionary journey play this huge role in how we get sick and how we heal. Think of it as maybe a shortcut to understanding yourself a bit better.
That's absolutely right. We'll be pulling insights from fields like medical anthropology, which explores how different societies see illness, and epidemiology, which studies how diseases actually spread through populations. And we'll use real-world examples to unpack how everything from ancient beliefs to our changing diets has literally reshaped our bodies and our health over millennia. Get ready for some surprising aha moments, I think.
Oh, okay. Let's jump right in then. When we talk about health, it's easy to think it's all just biology, right? Genes, germs, that sort of thing. But what if how a culture sees the body, or maybe how it explains illness, what if that fundamentally changes everything? That's really the heart of ethnomedicine, isn't it? How different cultures perceive health and illness in their own unique ways.
Exactly, yeah. Ethnomedicine is essentially a culture's entire belief system around health, illness, and how they respond to it. It's like their blueprint for well-being. And it really starts with how they view the human body itself. Very different perspectives.
Can you give us maybe some striking examples of these different blueprints?
Absolutely. Think about Ayurveda in India. Their ancient wisdom describes the body as being made of three fundamental energies or humors, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Optimal health for them means these three are in perfect balance. So an Ayurvedic treatment isn't just about fighting a symptom, it's about restoring that equilibrium. For instance, a specialist might suggest wearing, say, a copper bangle with mercury drops, specifically to restore a kapha balance. It's all about this holistic harmony.
Wow, okay.
Then there's Chinese medicine with its, famous concept of yin and yang. Yang represents the external visible body, what you see on the surface. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But yin is seen as this internal hidden realm, accessible only to skilled practitioners. They imagine this yin body almost like a house with a tree inside.
A house with a tree.
Yeah, where different parts of the house represent different body parts. Maybe the walls are your skin, the flowers on the tree, your genitals, things like that. A specialist might metaphorically visit this inner house to understand and fix a problem. Doesn't that paint a vivid picture? It's quite different.
It really does. Very different way of thinking.
And a truly profound example is the Japanese concept of Gotai. This means wholeness or bodily intactness. It's a really deeply rooted cultural belief because they feel maintaining the body's wholeness is absolutely essential for rebirth as a human. This leads to a cultural preference against anything that, well, distorts the body.
Okay, so if they value wholeness that much, what about something as extreme as, say, Japanese samurai beheading enemies? How does Gotai fit with that? Seems like a contradiction.
That's a powerful point, isn't it? Beheading was actually considered the ultimate distortion, completely ending the enemy's chance for human rebirth in their view. In a medical context, this deep belief in Gotai helps explain why Japan has traditionally had such low rates of surgery.
Ah, okay.
And why there's often widespread cultural resistance to both donating and accepting organs. They don't want anything external implanted, nor do they want parts of their body taken away. Similarly, many Japanese women might prefer natural childbirth over C-sections, really striving to maintain that bodily intactness.
It's incredible how deeply these beliefs run, influencing medical choices like that. So, beyond the body itself, how do these cultural views influence things like preventing illness or maybe even how death is defined?
Oh, it's significant.
Yeah.
Consider the definition of death. In the U.S., a person can be declared legally dead if they are brain dead, right? Even if their heart is still beating.
Okay.
But in Japan, traditionally, there's no concept of brain dead. A person isn't declared dead until their entire body stops functioning.
Really, the whole body?
The whole body.
Yeah.
This reveals very different cultural priorities about what actually constitutes life and death. And for prevention, look at Thailand's Ava's belief. Pregnant women there are often treated with extreme respect, given whatever foods they desire.
Why is that?
Well, because it's believed that stress during pregnancy can cause health issues for the baby, a condition they call avas.
Right.
So it's this insightful cultural way to ensure maternal and infant well-being by reducing stress. Pretty clever, actually.
Yeah, built-in stress reduction.
Exactly. And then there's Mary Beth Mills' study in rural Thailand. She observed something fascinating. When men died unexpectedly while working abroad, a rumor spread about a widow ghost.
A widow
Yeah, a
ghost.
ghost who desired men for sexual relations. So to protect themselves, villages would erect these large wooden phalluses outside their homes.
Seriously, wooden phalluses.
Yep. It shows how societies create meaning and protective rituals when faced with unexplained tragedies. It often leads to practices like wearing amulets for protection, too. It's about finding control in uncertainty.
Okay, wow. These practices are so rooted in belief systems. But do they actually work in a medical sense?
Often, yes, they do.
Yeah.
But frequently through the incredibly powerful placebo effect.
Ah, the placebo effect. We hear about that a lot.
Right. This is when a patient's belief in a treatment, even if that treatment itself has no active medicinal properties, leads to a real, measurable improvement in their condition. It truly shows the mind's profound influence on the body.
So how does the placebo effect become so strong, especially with, say, traditional healers or shamans? What creates that power?
Well, it's often built on what anthropologists call a shamanistic complex, which is basically a powerful foundation of trust. Three key layers. First, the shaman's deep trust in their own power to heal. They have to believe it themselves.
Okay.
Second, the patient's trust in that specific shaman.
Right.
And third, the society's trust in the shaman and the whole system. It's interesting, if one healer doesn't succeed, people don't usually reject the whole system. They just find another healer, much like we might change doctors if one isn't a good fit for us.
That makes sense. Maintain faith in the system, just change the practitioner.
Exactly. And the anthropologist Tori Fuller identified 4 key factors that often make these healers seem so effective, contributing to that placebo response. First, naming the disease. If an ailment gets a name, it immediately feels more understandable, more controllable, maybe more curable.
Gives it boundaries.
Precisely. Second, the practitioner's personality. Healers who are empathetic, compassionate, who really listened, they inspire more trust. Think about how you feel about a doctor who truly listens versus one who doesn't.
Huge difference, yeah.
Third, patient expectations. These are raised by visible signs of authority or competence, maybe awards on the wall, certificates, special robes. It all builds belief. And fourth, the curing techniques themselves. They often mimic aspects of modern medicine to appear legitimate. Think about an orthopedist, a bone doctor holding a stethoscope.
Yeah.
They don't really need it for bones, but it looks like what a proper doctor does, right? Boosts confidence.
So it's about the performance too, but is all traditional healing just a placebo then? Is that the takeaway?
Absolutely not. No, that's a crucial point to make. It's definitely not all placebo. Many indigenous practices contain highly effective treatments based on deep, generations-long knowledge of their local environment and its medicinal plants. Real pharmacology.
Okay, like actual active ingredients.
Exactly. For instance, Carol Browner studied the Oaxacan community in Mexico. They use specific plants very precisely to regulate women's reproductive cycles, maybe to induce abortion, start menstruation, prevent miscarriage, or even aid healing after delivery. When modern science later tested these plants, they confirmed they contained active chemicals that produced exactly those effects.
Wow. So the knowledge was there all along.
It was. Another example, the Hausa community in Africa, studied by Nina Etkin. They live in a malaria-prone region, and they had knowledge of over 500 plants that could be combined to treat more than 5,000 different symptoms or diseases. Incredible botanical knowledge.
5,000. That's immense.
It is. And of course, in India, Ayurveda offers vast knowledge of plants like tulsi, neem, and haldi that's turmeric for their therapeutic effects. Turmeric, for instance, is widely used for internal healing after an injury. It has proven anti-inflammatory properties.
This accumulated knowledge is clearly so valuable. It makes me think of why India had to create something like the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, the TKDL. Why was that necessary? Was it being stolen?
It was critically necessary, yeah. Essentially to protect centuries of accumulated wisdom. India created the TKDL to prevent other countries or companies from patenting traditional Indian remedies, like those using tulsi or neem, which had actually already happened in some cases.
Unbelievable. Patenting ancient knowledge.
Right. The library digitizes information about these traditional resources and their medicinal uses, ensuring that this ancestral knowledge, often passed down orally for generations, is protected from being exploited and claimed by others. It's about sovereignty over their heritage.
That's a powerful way to safeguard cultural heritage and health. Okay, so that's ethnomedicine. Now, let's shift gears a bit to epidemiology. This isn't just about individual health, right? It's about health on a population level. How do epidemiologists approach understanding disease on that grander scale?
Right. Epidemiology is literally the study of what befalls a population. Epidemiology. It zeroes in on the determinants, the causes, the risk factors, and the distribution of disease. Where does it happen? Who does it affect? And crucially, it's not just about biological factors. It deeply considers socioeconomic factors, political situations, cultural practices. All these things influence who gets sick, why, and how disease spreads through a community. It's really like detective work for public health.
Okay, detective work. So how does that detective work actually unfold? Say a new disease emerges or an existing one spreads widely. What are the steps?
It generally follows a three-step process. First, there's public health surveillance. This involves identifying exactly who is getting sick and where you're essentially mapping the disease's footprint in the population.
Finding the patterns.
Finding the patterns, exactly. Second, they search for the cause, pinpointing those determinants we just talked about, biological, social, environmental, whatever they might be. And third, they use that vital information for policymaking and intervention. How do we control it? How do we prevent it from spreading further? It informs public health action.
Can you give us some maybe surprising examples of how non-biological factors like social conditions, farming practices, even political situations have caused or spread diseases?
Absolutely. There's some really striking ones. Consider the rise of hookworm infection in China. Epidemiologists discovered a strong link to paddy cultivators.
Rice farmers.
Rice farmers, yeah, who used human excreta, or night soil, as fertilizer in their fields. It was a traditional practice. But this human waste, submerged in the paddy water, created a perfect breeding ground for hookworms. This led to really high infection rates among these farmers. It shows how a specific agricultural practice can directly impact public health.
Wow, direct link.
Very direct. Another, perhaps more profound example is the impact of colonialism. Studies have shown that colonial rule in many parts of the world led to a long-term rise in chronic disorders. Things like diabetes, obesity, alcoholism, and also psychological issues like anxiety and depression in the colonized populations.
Generations later.
Generations later, how truly remarkable is it that historical events from decades or centuries ago can still be shaping our current disease profiles? It's a long shadow.
That's incredible.
Or think about prion proteins. These cause horrible disorders like mad cow disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans. During some colonial periods, particularly with extreme poverty and social stratification, poor people sometimes resorted to consuming recycled wheat seeds recovered from cow dung because cows don't fully digest them.
Eating seeds from dung out of desperation.
Out of sheer desperation. But this practice inadvertently introduced these misfolded prion proteins into the human body, leading to these fatal brain-destroying disorders. It's a chilling example of how social and economic desperation can literally lead to entirely new diseases.
Good grief.
And then there's the emergence of HIV/AIDS. The first human case, now traced back to around the 1940s in Africa, is strongly linked to the consumption of bushmeat specifically. Butchering and eating chimpanzee meat likely infected with a simian version of the virus. This practice may have become more prevalent due to factors like militant rule, disrupting traditional food sources and causing severe food scarcity. It highlights how political instability and resource scarcity can actually drive the emergence and then the rapid spread of devastating new diseases.
So it's really showing that disease isn't just about microbes floating around. It's deeply, deeply intertwined with human society, politics, history, everything.
Absolutely. You can't separate them.
Okay. It's truly mind-bending to connect current health issues back like that. Let's go way, way back now. Back to one of our most important ancestors, Homo erectus. Why are they so significant in this larger story of human health, evolution, and culture?
Homo erectus. Well, they're often called the beginning of globalization, in a sense. They were the first human ancestor, the first from our genus Homo, to actually move out of Africa.
The first ones to leave home?
The first ones to leave home. A monumental step that literally paved the way for human dispersal across the entire globe. This widespread movement meant they had to adapt to incredibly diverse climates and environments, which in turn profoundly influenced their diet, their behavior, and ultimately their health.
How long ago were they around, and how long did they actually survive on Earth? You've heard different numbers.
They lived from about 1.8 million years ago down to maybe 0.3 million years ago or 300,000 years ago, which means they survived for an incredible 1.5 to 1.7 million years.
Well, how 1.5 million years?
Yeah, compare that to us Homo sapiens. We've only been on Earth for roughly 200,000 years, maybe 300,000 at the outside.
It certainly makes you wonder about our own species' potential longevity, doesn't it? They were remarkably successful. Puts things in perspective. And their fossils have been found all over Africa, Asia, Europe. What does this tell us about their resilience and their adaptability?
Their widespread dispersal is really key. From famous finds like Turkana Man in Kenya, who is quite tall, to Peking Man in China. Their adaptability was incredible. They conquered incredibly diverse environments. And what's even more striking, maybe a bit shocking, is that in Europe, particularly in Spain, we found clear evidence of cannibalism among Homo erectus populations.
Cannibalism? Really? How do we know?
We found fragmented hominid bones with definite cut marks on them, made by stone tools, and some skulls where the foramen magnum, that's the big hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord connects, was deliberately widened.
Why widen that hole?
The strong suggestion is they were extracting the brain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, was this ritualistic? Was it just survival cannibalism during times of extreme scarcity? The debate is still ongoing, but it shows complex, maybe dark behavior early on.
Fascinating. And a bit grim. What about their culture and technology? What advancements did they make that might have shaped future human health and society?
Well, they belong to what we call the lower Paleolithic culture, and they made a huge leap in tool technology with Acheulean tools.
Acheulean. How are they different?
They were much more refined than the earlier Oldowan tools.
Mm-hmm.
Acheulean tools involved flaking the entire stone core, shaping the whole thing, not just knocking flakes off the edges. They were often bifacial, worked on both sides. Their signature tool, the one everyone knows, is the hand axe. It's typically symmetrical, often teardrop-shaped, a real multi-tool used for cutting meat, digging roots, cracking bones from marrow. Very versatile. They also use scrapers.
Okay, better tools. But you mentioned fire earlier.
Yes. The control of fire is perhaps the most revolutionary development associated with Homo erectus. It was a complete game changer.
How so? How did controlling fire allow them to survive multiple ice ages, especially when moving into much colder places like Europe?
It absolutely was key. Fire provided crucial warmth, obviously, allowing them to inhabit colder regions. It also offered defense against predators, keeping dangerous animals away at night.
Makes sense. Warmth and safety.
But its impact went even deeper. It fundamentally changed human behavior and social structure. Fire likely promoted social life, people gathering around the campfire after dark. This extended their activity timeline beyond daylight hours.
Campfire stories starting early.
You can say that. And this gathering, this sustained social interaction around the fire, sharing food, maybe coordinating hunts, it very likely instigated communication and the early development of language. It created the context for more complex interaction. As one scholar put it, as man tamed the fire, he tamed himself. It fostered cooperation and social bonds.
Wow, so fire wasn't just practical, it might have kick-started language.
It's a strong hypothesis, yeah. The social environment it created was likely crucial. For shelter, they lived near water sources, especially rivers, because food plants and animals would be more abundant there. They definitely inhabited caves, like the famous Peking Man site in China. And in open areas, they even seem to have used rudimentary fortification, maybe arranging large stones as windbreaks, or to create a more protected sleeping area, hiding from predators.
Smart adaptations. And food, you mentioned hunting.
Yes, a major shift with Homo erectus is that they became active big game hunters, not just scavengers.
Hunting mammoths.
Well, evidence points to things like hippos and elephants. They likely used group effort and clever techniques, maybe driving large animals into natural pits or swamps using fire, then killing them with spears or tools. This access to large amounts of meat and fat had huge implications for their nutrition, energy budgets, and probably brain development.
Right, brain fuel.
Exactly. And then there's this really fun speculative idea, the unused hand axe hypothesis.
Unused? Why make them if you don't use them?
Good question. Archaeologists have found some absolutely perfectly crafted, beautiful Acheulean hand axes that show absolutely no signs of wear or use. They look pristine. So what could this possibly mean? One idea is maybe they were used as a form of currency or as ritual gifts.
Okay.
But another, even more intriguing hypothesis is that crafting these highly symmetrical, difficult-to-make tools was a way for males to display their skill, their knowledge of materials, their planning ability, their strength, essentially, as a way to seduce females, like a peacock's tail.
A stone tool love offering. You're kidding.
Haha. Well, it's a debated hypothesis. But it suggests that even back then, demonstrating intelligence and capability might have been attractive. What do you think could a beautifully made hand axe impress a potential mate?
It's definitely a fun thought. Okay, so our ancestors, Homo erectus, were already dealing with complex tools, fire, social dynamics, maybe even romance. Now let's jump forward again. How did that major shift in human history, the move from hunting and gathering to agriculture, drastically change our health profile in ways that still affect us today?
Oh, this. The agricultural revolution, starting around 10,000, 12,000 years ago, it profoundly impacted our bodies and our disease patterns. It's hard to overstate the changes. Let's compare the two lifestyles directly. When it came to energy, hunter-gatherers generally had high energy intake, but they also had incredibly high expenditure due to constant movement and intense physical activity.
Always on the move.
Always on the move. Agriculturalists, however, tended to have high intake, sometimes more reliable food, but much lower expenditure. Farming is hard work, but it's often seasonal, and it led to more sedentary lifestyles overall. Plus, job specialization emerged. Not everyone was farming. Some made tools, pottery, managed grain stores, leading to less physical exertion for many.
So intake stayed high, output dropped.
Pretty much. Their electrolyte balance also changed dramatically. Hunter-gatherers got lots of potassium from diverse plant foods. Agriculturalists, on the other hand, started using salt much more, mainly for food preservation. This led to a significant rise in sodium intake.
And we know what high sodium does today.
It's exactly high blood pressure, hypertension. It's a modern echo of that dietary shift. For micronutrients, hunter-gatherers generally enjoyed balanced nutrition from a really varied seasonal diet.
Yeah.
They ate whatever was available. But agriculturalists often came to rely heavily on a single staple diet, like maize in the Americas, rice in Asia, wheat in the Middle East.
Putting all their eggs in one basket, nutritionally.
Right. And this often led to micronutrient deficiencies. Think of pellagra from maize-dependent diets, vitamin B3 deficiency, or beriberi from polished rice, a vitamin B1 deficiency. These became common problems. Their fat intake profile changed too. Paleolithic diets likely had around 25–30% fat, but it was mostly unsaturated, healthier fats from wild game, nuts, seeds. Agricultural diets often saw an increase in total fat, sometimes up to 40%, and critically, a higher proportion of saturated, poorer quality fats, often from domesticated animals.
Not great for the arteries.
It's not great. And finally, with the increased consumption of sugar and carbohydrates in agricultural societies, especially processed grains, and later refined sugars, we see the clear emergence of dental enamel degradation and dental caries. Cavities became much more common.
So that's why our teeth aren't as good as our ancestors?
In large part, yes. The shift in diet played a huge role.
Okay, that's a lot of significant negative changes, nutrient deficiencies, cavities, maybe hypertension risk. But you mentioned earlier that life expectancy actually increased in settled agricultural societies. If diets got worse and new diseases cropped up, how does that make sense? Seems paradoxical.
It does seem like a paradox, and it's a great question. While things like predation threats likely decreased in settled villages, allowing people to live longer on average than some hunter-gatherer groups, there's another factor. Our bodies were arguably biologically designed or evolved for a shorter lifespan, maybe around 30–40 years maximum in the wild. When agriculture and settled life allowed us to start living longer past that evolutionary warranty period, body parts like teeth, joints, and organs naturally began to deteriorate more. They were simply being used for longer than they were originally intended to last. So longer life came with the cost of age-related decline.
The expiry date problem.
Exactly, the expiry date problem. And there were other major impacts of agriculture too. A huge one was a significant rise in infectious diseases.
Why did that happen?
Several reasons, all linked to the new lifestyle. Domestication of animals brought humans into close, constant contact with animal pathogens. Think measles from cattle, flu from birds and pigs. That's zoonosis.
Living with the source.
Living with the source. Plus, digging in soil exposed people to soil-borne pathogens. Storing grains attracted rodents and insects, which carry diseases. Stagnant water used for irrigation became breeding grounds for mosquitoes carrying malaria. And critically, increased population density in villages and towns allowed infections to spread like wildfire. Diseases that might have died out in small, mobile hunter-gatherer bands could now become endemic, permanently present in the population.
A perfect storm for germs.
A perfect storm. We also saw an increased fertility rate in agricultural societies.
More babies. Why?
A couple of factors. Women likely attained puberty younger, possibly due to having slightly more body fat on average, a result of less intense physical activity and maybe more consistent carbohydrate-rich food availability. Plus, softer agricultural foods like porridges made from grains meant children could be weaned from breast milk much earlier than in hunter-gatherer societies.
And weaning matters because
extended breastfeeding tends to suppress ovulation naturally, acting as a form of birth spacing for hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
When that period of breastfeeding shortened, the interval between births shortened too. So combine factors. Earlier puberty, earlier weaning.
Hmm.
Essentially, the more food, less intense movement, more babies.
Wow, population boom fuel.
Definitely contributed.
Boy.
And finally, there were noticeable skull and skeletal changes. Those softer agricultural foods required much less chewing effort compared to tough wild plants and meat.
Less jaw workout.
Exactly. Less jaw workout. Over generations, this reduced the stimulus for robust growth in our faces and jaws. The result? Smaller jaws with often not quite enough room for all our teeth. This leads directly to malocclusions, crooked, crowded, uneven teeth. That's a big reason why orthodontics and braces are so common today. Our jaws literally shrank.
Unbelievable. So my needing braces is partly down to the invention of farming.
In a way, yes.
Yes.
It's part of that legacy.
Okay, this all connects brilliantly to a really interesting idea I know you wanted to discuss. The thrifty genotype hypothesis. What is that, and how does it link our deep evolutionary past to modern health challenges like diabetes?
Right, the thrifty genotype hypothesis. It was first proposed by the geneticist James Neal back in the 1960s. The core idea is that over long periods of evolution, our genes were selected to be thrifty.
Thrifty, like saving money.
Sort of, saving energy. It means our genes favored the incredibly efficient use and, critically, the storage of nutrients, especially calories as fat. This made perfect evolutionary sense in ancestral environments where food supply was often unpredictable. You had periods of plenty, maybe, but also frequent periods of scarcity or even famine. So bodies that were really good at storing energy during the good times had a better chance of surviving the bad times. Our bodies were basically programmed to save for that rainy day, storing any surplus energy as fat.
Okay, survival advantage back then. But how do these thrifty genes affect us now in today's world where, for many, food is not scarce?
Well, that's the crux of the problem. In today's environment, especially in developed nations with constant access to calorie-rich foods, these same thrifty genes actually work against us. The body continues its ancient program. It really is. Another line of evidence comes from gestational diabetes. This is when high blood sugar develops specifically during pregnancy and usually disappears after birth. From a thrifty genotype perspective, this could be seen as an adaptive mechanism. The mother's body becomes slightly insulin-resistant, effectively storing extra nutrients and making more glucose available for the growing fetus, epigenetically preparing it for a world where scarcity might be the norm. But in modern times, with abundant food, this natural tendency leads to excessively high blood sugar for the mother.
Preparing the baby for hardship that doesn't come.
Exactly. And perhaps one of the most profound and sobering examples is the potential legacy of colonialism, especially in India and South Asia. Historical records show that during the British Raj, India experienced approximately 25 major famines in just under 90 years. Compare that to maybe 17 significant famines in the entire 2,000 years prior.
25 major famines in less than a century.
Yes, an unprecedented frequency and severity, often linked to colonial policies. The thrifty genotype hypothesis suggests that this intense, prolonged period of severe food scarcity acted as a powerful selective pressure. It epigenetically, starvation-adapted South Asian genes even more strongly. Their bodies became perhaps even more efficient at storing calories, possibly more resistant to insulin's action, prioritizing fat storage. This is now thought to be a major contributing factor to the exceptionally high rates of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease we see in South Asian populations today, both in the subcontinent and in diaspora communities around the world.
So history isn't just history. It's literally written in our genes and affecting our health today.
That's the implication. How truly profound is it that historical events, political decisions made generations ago, can shape our current genetic predispositions to disease? It's a powerful connection.
It really is. So this means a common advice, just eat less and exercise more, might not work equally well for everyone, especially for populations with these strong thrifty features.
Exactly. That's a critical point. For populations that likely possess these thrifty features, and many argue this includes South Asians, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, among others, simply exercising more might not be enough to fully counteract this tendency. Their bodies are metabolically programmed to be extremely efficient, to preferentially store carbohydrates and sugar as fat. This really highlights why we need to, as some researchers put it, decolonize health research. We need to move beyond one-size-fits-all advice and tailor recommendations to the specific metabolic profiles and histories of different ethnic groups. perhaps even incorporating traditional dietary practices or activities like Ayurveda or yoga in the South Asian context, which might be more aligned with their underlying biological programming.
That makes so much sense. It also seems connected to how our bodies handle stress, doesn't it? Our modern lives are often incredibly stressful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Our bodies are quite, well, primitive in how they perceive stress. They recognize all kinds of stress, whether it's a looming deadline, a relationship breakup, financial worries, or an actual famine, as basically a single biological threat signal, a threat to survival.
It can't tell the difference between a tiger and a traffic jam.
Pretty much. It doesn't finally distinguish the source. When we're stressed, our body releases cortisol, the primary stress hormone. One effect of cortisol is that it makes us crave high-energy foods, especially sugar.
Why sugar?
Because consuming sugar triggers a rapid release of dopamine in the brain, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. It makes us feel good, temporarily counteracting the stress.
Ah, the comfort food cycle.
Exactly. This creates a vicious cycle.
Hmm.
Stress leads to cortisol, cortisol leads to sugar cravings, eating sugar gives a temporary dopamine hit but leads to weight gain, insulin spikes, and further health issues, which can cause more stress. Our body just thinks it's doing the right thing, storing up energy to survive the perceived crisis.
Wow. Okay, the thrifty genotype idea sounds incredibly compelling, explaining so much. But are there any weaknesses? Any criticisms of this hypothesis? Science always involves debate.
Yes, absolutely. It's a powerful idea, but it's not without its challenges. There are three main criticisms often raised. First, the assumption that severe, frequent famines were universally common enough across all ancestral human populations to provide such strong selective pressure isn't fully supported by archaeological or anthropological evidence. Some groups who exhibit thrifty features today actually lived historically in relatively resource-rich environments where severe famine might have been rare.
So the famine pressure wasn't universal.
Potentially not universal or uniform enough to explain everything, yeah. Second, if the hypothesis were entirely correct, we might expect hunter-gatherers to have become significantly obese during the periods of abundance between famines, as their thrifty bodies stored up energy. Yet, studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, or skeletal evidence from the past, generally don't show widespread obesity even when resources were temporarily plentiful. They seem to manage energy balance differently.
Okay. That doesn't quite fit.
It's a point of contention. Third, some argue that being obese might not always have been advantageous, even in times of scarcity. For hunter-gatherers, obesity could potentially increase the risk of predation, making them slower, easier targets. Also, evidence suggests that death during historical famines often resulted not just from pure starvation, but from infectious diseases taking hold due to weakened immune systems. Simply having more fat reserves might not have protected against that outcome.
Right, disease was a bigger killer than just lack of calories sometimes.
Exactly. So, these criticisms led to an alternative related idea, the thrifty phenotype hypothesis. This was proposed by David Barker, sometimes called the Barker hypothesis.
Thrifty phenotype, how is that different from thrifty genotype?
The key difference is timing and mechanism. The thrifty phenotype hypothesis suggests that these thrifty characteristics aren't solely determined by genes inherited over a long evolutionary time. Instead, they develop primarily during a critical window, fetal development in the womb.
So it's about the environment before birth.
Precisely. If a pregnant mother experiences significant nutrient scarcity or stress, the fetus receives signals that the outside world is harsh and resources are limited. In response, the fetus epigenetically adapts its metabolism. It essentially gets programmed in the womb to be extremely efficient at storing nutrients, anticipating a life of potential scarcity after birth.
Wow, adapting before it's even born.
Exactly. These epigenetic changes, modifications to how genes are expressed, not changes to the DNA sequence itself, can then persist throughout the individual's life. And crucially, some epigenetic marks can even be passed down across generations. This could help explain patterns of diseases like diabetes running in families, even beyond shared genes. It's about the developmental environment shaping long-term health.
So genotype is the blueprint, phenotype is how it's built based on conditions.
That's a good way to put it. The phenotype hypothesis emphasizes the powerful role of the early life environment, particularly in utero, in setting up metabolic trajectories. Many researchers now think it's likely a combination of both thrifty genotypes and thrifty phenotypes contributing to modern metabolic diseases.
Fascinating. It adds another layer of complexity. Okay, let's try to bring all these threads together now with a big concept, the epidemiological transition. What is this big idea, and how does it summarize the changing face of disease throughout human history?
Right, the epidemiological transition. This is a model proposed by Abdel Omran back in 1971. It describes the major shifts in patterns of mortality, what people die from, and disease as societies undergo modernization, development, and demographic changes. Essentially, it charts the global move from an era dominated by high rates of infectious diseases and early death towards an era characterized more by chronic, degenerative, and often human-made diseases alongside significantly longer average lifespans.
So a shift in what makes us sick and kills us as societies change. What are the core ideas behind it?
Omran highlighted four main propositions. First, that mortality death rates is a fundamental factor influencing population dynamics and change. Seems obvious, but it's central. Second, that over the long term, there's a distinct shift in disease patterns, where infectious diseases gradually recede as the primary causes of death, and they get replaced by degenerative diseases like heart disease, cancer, and human-made diseases like those linked to pollution or lifestyle. Third, he argued that the most profound changes in health and survival during this transition are typically seen first and most dramatically among children and young women, especially women of reproductive age. Their survival rates improve significantly.
Interesting focus there.
Yes. And fourth, these shifts in health and disease patterns are closely linked to broader processes of modernization, things like demographic transition, shifts in birth and death rates, and socioeconomic development, improvements in sanitation, nutrition, healthcare.
Okay, so it connects disease patterns to how societies evolve, and Omran describes specific phases or stages in this transition for humankind, right? What are they?
Yes, he outlined three major phases or ages. The first is the age of pestilence and famine. This really began with the advent of agriculture and sedentary lifestyles, maybe 8,000, 10,000 years ago, and lasted for millennia. It was marked by a dramatic rise in infectious diseases becoming endemic, fueled by all those factors we discussed. Animal domestication, poor sanitation in settlements, higher population density. This led to very high and wildly fluctuating mortality rates, especially from epidemics, and consequently a very low average life expectancy, maybe only 20, 30 years.
Nasty, brutish, and short, as they say.
Pretty much sums it up for many people back then. The second phase is the age of receding pandemics. This started gradually, perhaps around the 15th, 16th century with early public health measures, but really took off with modern medical care and sanitation improvements in the 19th and 20th centuries. The development of vaccines, antibiotics, improvements in hygiene, clean water, better nutrition, all these led to a significant decline in deaths from infectious diseases. Pandemics still happened, but they became less frequent and less deadly overall. Life expectancy started to climb steadily, reaching maybe 50 years or more.
So, progress against infection. But was there a trade-off?
There was a trade-off. As people survived infections and lived longer, they increasingly started dying from chronic degenerative diseases, things like cancer, heart disease, stroke, pulmonary diseases. These became the leading causes of death. It's partly that expiry date issue again. People were living long enough for these conditions associated with aging and wear and tear to develop.
Oh, right. Survive the bugs, face the breakdown.
In a nutshell. And that leads us to the third phase, which Omran called the age of man-made and degenerative diseases. This is essentially our current era in developed countries, and what many developing countries are now rapidly entering. It's characterized by mortality continuing to decline and life expectancy reaching unprecedented levels, often into the 70s, 80s, or even higher. But the disease landscape is complex. It's a combination of old problems returning in new forms and the full flowering of degenerative and lifestyle-related conditions.
So what does that look like specifically? What defines this current age?
Well, several things are happening simultaneously. First, we're seeing the emergence of new infectious diseases and the reemergence or strengthening of old ones. Microorganisms evolve drug resistance due to overuse of antibiotics. It's an evolutionary arms race. Superbugs, exactly. And human activity, deforestation, expanding agriculture, global travel pushes us into new environments, increasing contact with novel pathogens, often jumping from animals, zoonotic diseases. Think HIV, Ebola, SARS, COVID-19. Over 60% of new infectious diseases identified between 1940 and 2004 were zoonotic, often linked to changes in diet like bushmeat and increased human mobility.
So infections haven't gone away, they're just changing?
They're changing and sometimes fighting back harder. Second, we see the continued rise of degenerative diseases. As medical care keeps extending lifespans even further, more people live long enough for organs and systems to deteriorate significantly, leading to higher rates of diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, various forms of dementia, and age-related conditions like severe anemia or osteoporosis. And third, there's the major rise of lifestyle diseases, sometimes called diseases of affluence, although they now affect all socioeconomic levels. Our modern, often sedentary, high-stress lives contribute massively to conditions like obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, but also mental health issues like chronic anxiety, depression, OCD, and perhaps even neurodevelopmental conditions like autism spectrum disorder, though the causes there are complex.
And you mentioned stress earlier.
Yes. Remember how our bodies react to chronic stress by creating sugar, leading to weight gain and metabolic disruption. This really helps explain why these conditions, once maybe considered rich man's diseases, are now so incredibly widespread, affecting people across the board, even young students facing academic pressure. Our lifestyles are literally making us sick in new ways.
It's quite a sobering picture of our current health landscape. Wow. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground today. What an incredible journey, really, through human health. From ancient healing beliefs all the way to modern pandemics and lifestyle issues, it really shows how deeply interconnected our health is with our culture, our history, and our deep evolutionary past.
It really does. We started way back with ethnomedicine, didn't we? Seeing how different cultures perceive the body and illness so differently, like Ayurveda's humors in India, or the concept of Gotai, bodily wholeness in Japan. We explored how these cultural beliefs shape practices, treatments, and even the surprising power of the placebo effect driven by trust.
Yeah, and then we zoomed out to the population level with epidemiology, understanding how social factors, political history like colonialism, even farming practices like using night soil can determine how diseases like hookworm or HIV/AIDS spread, and how historical events can leave a long shadow on health even generations later.
Then we traveled way back in time with Homo erectus, discovering how their amazing innovations like controlling fire and crafting Acheulean tools shaped not just their survival in new environments, but also paved the way for more complex social interaction, maybe even language. And we touched on those intriguing hints of complex behaviors like cannibalism or maybe those unused hand axes as status symbols or courtship gifts.
Right, the sexy hand axe theory. And finally, we brought it right back to how our bodies function today, seeing how that massive shift from hunter-gatherer life to agricultural diets fundamentally changed our bodies. It led to new diseases like dental caries, skeletal changes like smaller jaws, and set the stage for that fascinating thrifty genotype and phenotype dilemma where our bodies, adapted for ancient scarcity, struggle with modern abundance, preparing for famines that thankfully, for many, never come.
Exactly. And we wrapped it all up with the concept of the epidemiological transition, understanding those three broad ages of disease humankind has moved through, from the age of pestilence and famine driven by early agriculture to the age of receding pandemics thanks to sanitation and medicine, and finally landing us in our current age of man-made and degenerative diseases, where chronic conditions, lifestyle factors, and even stress itself have become powerful determinants of our health and longevity.
What an amazing deep dive. It truly makes you consider how every layer of our past biological, cultural, historical lives on in our present bodies and influences our well-being every single day.
It absolutely should. And maybe this whole deep dive should prompt you, the listener, to ask a final question. Thinking about our current world, our digital lives, our processed foods, our environmental changes, what societal habits are our bodies adapting to right now? And what surprising health consequences might our descendants face centuries from now because of the lifestyles we're living today?
That's a powerful thought to end on. What will our legacy be? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning about these incredible connections between who we were, who we are, and how all of it shapes your health.